Hello everyone, this is Space Café Podcast, and I am Marcus. So, the other day I vented some emotions publicly and unintentionally stirred up some internet dust, at least on LinkedIn. And here is why. After the first launch attempt of SLS had to be cancelled due to a hydrogen leak, I wrote that SLS is an obsolete system from a long-gone era that should be mothballed. As painful as that may be, and I still stand by that, a system that devours $4 billion per launch and then has to be discarded has no right to exist, no matter how much money it has swallowed up and how many jobs and hopes are attached to it. This has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with sustainability, and it would be a courageous step to pull the plug. NASA is not doing itself any favors either, because in contrast to the space shuttle, which for many other reasons did not meet its expectations, there is no real big vision worthy of the 21st century in SLS. But the space scene can also be different, and I don't have to quote the usual suspects, even if Elon was able to reduce launch costs by a factor of 10 with SpaceX. And I think we're just at the beginning of a much larger development here, especially since smaller and agile startups have entered the scene. Space is no longer just about massive national funding. Of course, big money is needed, but the rules are changing. Accelerators and venture capital has recognized the potential of the scene, and so more and more young startups are taking their chance. The aerospace accelerator Starburst calls itself the world's first and only global accelerator in the field, managing 120 startups in 12 countries on 3 continents. Starburst has offices in Los Angeles, Paris, Munich, Abu Dhabi, Tel Aviv, Montreal, South Korea, and Singapore. And the head of the Tel Aviv office, Noemie Alliel, is now taking the time to join us in the studio, even after a very, very long flight.
Yes, I did arrive yesterday, so still a bit jet lagged, but it's working in your favor because I just woke up, so feeling good and fresh.
Welcome, Noemie, to the Space Café Podcast.
Well, sure, thanks for the opportunity to exchange with you. It's always a pleasure. So my name is Noemie Alliel. I'm the managing director of Starburst in Israel. And I like everything that flies, basically. Started like this with a big passion for flight and everything that magically fly.
So where does that come from?
I have no idea, but I could tell you that ever since I was young, like in my teenage years, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, so specifically helicopter. Obviously,
because it's difficult.
No, because I saw a series on the TV that was called at the time Eurocopter. And it was really fascinating. And I was fascinated by this huge machine that is so heavy and yet can fly and hover, because the hovering part is the magical part in a helicopter. And I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. I obviously went to my parents with this wonderful idea, and they said, no, this is a hobby. This is not a job. You'll do this later. And as a matter of fact, I did. So when I had a chance and I lived in New York, after my studies, obviously, which ended up doing business, I pursued my childhood dream and I became a helicopter pilot.
Wow. I mean, like how, okay, mind is blown already at the beginning. We're 2 minutes into that conversation. All right. So what I always wanted to know about piloting a helicopter, is it more difficult than piloting an aeroplane?
Yes, 100%. And that's what also attracted me probably to helicopter, because it is more challenging. And before going into this adventure, so to speak, I tried piloting a plane just to compare. before investing time and efforts. And I was like, no, helicopter all the way. This is way more fun. And it's more complicated because you have more moving parts and because the helicopter can do a lot more things like going sideways and backwards and hover, which obviously a plane cannot do.
Do you own your own helicopter in the backyard?
No, not yet.
So how often do you have to practice? Because I could imagine, do you lose your license if you don't practice enough?
No. So luckily, I was licensed in the US. So it's by the FAA, and it's like a driving license. You cannot lose it. Like, once you know how to drive, you know how to drive. However, you have to stay current in order for you to be able to rent a helicopter or drive your own. So I'm not current because in order to be current, you have to fly at least every 2 months, I believe. And also you have to update your medical certificate, which I haven't done in a while. But it's okay. Like the day I will want to buy one, I will be able to get current and get my medical sorted out. So
you mentioned you did that while you were staying in New York, but you're from France, right?
That's right. I was born and raised there. So I got all my formative years and my, I guess, education there. And then at the ripe age of 20, I decided that it was time to go study abroad. And I purposely chose an international business school that would allow me to study abroad. I remember also wanting to learn English very early on because I thought, where is the best place to learn English? Well, the United States. So I went there and I didn't plan it, but I ended up staying in the US for 9 years. So I finished my degree, then I got a job, then I had a boyfriend, and then life kind of continued. And then all the way through New York, where the whole helicopter thing happened as well.
It's unusual for French people to leave their country.
I see what you mean. Yes, although there's quite a few of us out there, the French expats, we call them. And interestingly speaking, those who do leave, they rarely come back. They ended up living in this expat life for a while. I would say it's more unusual for French people to speak English well, which I saw again at the conference and before. And it's a cultural thing. But I do think that everybody should at least speak 2 languages, and English should be one of them, just so we can all be connected, because communication is so crucial, regardless of which language we were born with.
Absolutely. Tell me more about your time in New York, because I guess that was also the formative time for your later business ventures. Yes.
So New York, I always say to people who ask that everybody should live at least 2 years in their life in New York, because it's such an amazing city. It's not New York for any reason. And I think it's a place where people are driven to work hard because you are surrounded by very smart people, lots of talent, and it's very international. I love the cosmopolitan aspect of it. So I arrived there, I was 20-something, 25, 26, and I was a consultant. So my first career, before I do what I do now, I was advising and helping distressed company. So it's called turnarounds. And so I was certified.
What's a distressed company?
It's a company that has more debt than, like, more liability than assets. So by default, they are what's called insolvent. And they are at risk to either go through a bankruptcy process called Chapter 11 in the US or through liquidation, which is Chapter 7. And so in order to not fail, they sometimes try to restructure, which is to salvage everything they can to start from scratch anew.
Interesting. And you were consulting them to get out of their misery.
Yeah, we were trying to rescue them, basically, which is, a lot of things like operational restructuring by closing branches that are very unprofitable, so you can save, rescue the other ones, changing in the management structure, doing what's called financial restructuring by rebalancing their balance sheets, making sure that their debt is not that heavy anymore, so they have a chance to get out of this situation. So yeah, a lot of operational and financial restructuring.
Well, you were in your early 20s. How does that work? I mean, like, isn't a little bit of corporate wisdom and experience necessary for something like this?
Of course, but that's why I wasn't alone. You work as a team. You are part of a larger team that have, the partners and the directors and all the hierarchy that you want in a team. And I was a senior associate, so I was doing my part. but learning tons of it. And this job really gave me a lot of exposure in different industries. And that's what I liked about it, the fact that you could learn so much. And it's non-monotonous, meaning every project, it's different because it's a different industry. So you have to learn the thing that is, it's going to help this company get around. But I was exposed to a lot of really interesting projects because I was working in this advisory firm called KPMG, which is well known. So we had a lot of high-profile projects, including the Blockbuster, which everybody knows about, that now went out of business famously. But for a while, we tried to save them. It didn't work.
Like a Blockbuster Video.
Yes, the video maker. For those of us who remember, So for a while,
still remember videotapes. There was something of the past. My kids wouldn't know what that is anymore.
Probably, yes. It's just so out there. And I was doing this job in one of the most exciting time in the industry. I mean, if you were in my shoes, not if you were on the other side, but it was during the financial crisis of 2008. So we had a lot of work because a lot of companies were going busted by then.
Why'd you move on and not stay in that field anymore?
Because I wanted to change. After, I think, 5 years in New York total, I was like, this is as good as it's going to get. And I guess it was a lifestyle which was not sustainable in the long run, though really fast-paced, and what I like to call the rat race, where you are constantly trying to push and earn more and more so you can keep up with the neighbors, but not really taking time to enjoy life. And I was like, I'm too young for this. I don't want that.
Spending ridiculous amounts of money for rent.
For rent, yes, to live. And also, if you were going to live in New York, so might as well live in Manhattan. Like, if you do it well. You know what I mean? If you can, of course, afford it.
So what is
mindset?
Sorry for interrupting, but because I'm super curious, of course. So what is, just for people just to give people a sense of New York life, what is your average rent in Manhattan for 100 square meters?
Wow, I think must have changed though, Marcus, because I was there 10 years ago. So the 10 years must have been like so cheap in today's money.
Yeah.
Already back then, I was paying minimum $3,500, which was more than 50% of my salary back then. So half of your salary, if not more, goes to rent. And then the other half, because you work so hard, you want to spend it and just blow it on things that brings you joy and make you happy. So I was spending it on helicopter flying hours, which was at the time $200 an hour, which is still cheap because now it's probably more expensive. But basically that was the lifestyle, which I was living it up. I was traveling all the time. I was enjoying. But to go back to your question, I felt the need for a change. And so because my mother is Israeli and my parents decided to go back there after France, I was like, let's give it a try. If I like it, I will stay in Israel. If I don't, I can always come back and continue my life in the US.
Sure.
And so I went a bit as another adventure to learn the language, because I also didn't speak Hebrew, not a word, just the basic one. And I ended up staying there where I currently live in Tel Aviv, and I've been there for 10 years. So evidently it paid off because I really enjoy living there.
What do you pick up then for a next profession?
So then after I moved there, I could not do the restructuring because it's a different country, different rules.
Yeah.
So I had to find a way to repackage my professional skills and background. And I was very lucky that I found a way that was A, interesting, B, made sense. So I was like, okay, a distressed company is essentially a company who has limited time, limited money, and is always in crisis mode. But it's not much different than a startup. So I was like, if I can help distressed companies, for sure I can also help startups in the same mindset. And luckily, Israel is known as a startup nation. So we have lots of startups in Israel. So I found my new career, if you will, by being a program director of an accelerator. So I essentially helped build an accelerator program together, obviously, with the nonprofit that I was working with. And we were supporting entrepreneurs by connecting them with mentors, by giving them the tools that they needed to successfully develop their product or their solution, and then connecting them to investors. And that's kind of how I got into the whole innovation game.
So, in Israel, that's mostly Tel Aviv, right? Like where the whole startup world is happening.
So Tel Aviv is definitely the startup hub where a lot of activities are happening. Also, bear in mind that Israel as a country is a small country, so everything is really connected. You are only a few hours from the other cities, but you do have most of the startup and innovation activities concentrated in what we call the center area, which is Tel Aviv and the surrounding cities.
Is the startup world in Israel focusing on a special industry, or is it like all over the place, offering opportunities for everyone?
Wow. I mean, I can speak for so long about the one I'm focusing on, which is aerospace and defense, which is really strong and bustling in Israel, but we have so many other industries. So I want to say, yeah, Israel is an innovative country in across almost all the different verticals, from fintech to cybersecurity to healthcare and health tech, agri-tech. So the list is long, but the one I'm focusing on is aerospace.
Because you like flying, of course. I learned that.
Yeah, because it started when I was in New York. And what I explain to people that are trying to get in the field is sometimes you don't know when the next opportunity is going to come up. But for sure, what I did in New York, which started as a hobby, opened the door for me to my current role at Starburst. Because without that, I would have felt that I wasn't qualified, and I would have probably not applied or not taken a chance to take on the lead. And because of that, I'm like, sure, I'm qualified. I don't have an engineering degree in aeronautics like most of my colleagues, but I do have a helicopter license, which some people would argue is as good. Yeah, should do.
Before you ventured into Starburst, you launched 2 startups yourself, right?
That's right. Yes, I when I was working as to help the startup, I was surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurs. So I caught what I called the entrepreneur's bug, which is basically saying, well, if so many other people are doing startups, why can't I do it as well?
Sure.
And I'm like, that sounds easy. Let's give it a try. Little did I know.
Can't be that difficult.
Yeah, but sometimes, Marcus, ignorance is bliss. When you don't know, also you don't know the obstacles that lies ahead. So it makes you more prone to try things that you wouldn't otherwise. And so I was in that mindset, and I was lucky to meet some technical co-founders that was complementary to my skill set. So I was brought on as a CEO on the business side, and they were doing the technical side. My first startup was called WeCast. It was a productivity tool that meant meaning to facilitate the life of business people doing a lot of presentations every day. And we wanted to be able to connect your smartphones, to the TV directly without cables, without laptops. So we had a really interesting tool, hardware solution that you would connect directly to the TV. And it was a great idea. Timing was not the best because Chromecast was just launched by Google. And then all the TVs were slowly moving to be smart TVs, which obviously had Miracast included in. So a lot of factors contributed to the fact that the startup, didn't really succeed or take off. But I learned so much out of WeCast. So I'm very grateful for even the failures brought me so much. The second one we tried to do with another set of founders was called Sonography. And that was a medical diagnostic technology that was using sound wave to basically detect if you have a pathogen in the body. And it was inspired by aerospace, funnily enough, the concept of non-destructive testings, where you can detect if you have a small cracks in an airplane fuselage. We were trying to bring this to the health sector. And again, it was a very ambitious, for that one, it was a very ambitious project that would have had a lot of consequences if it worked, but we couldn't, unfortunately, raise the seed funding we needed to build the MVP, which is the minimum viable product, for us to be able to really take that off. And then because of the lack of funding, the team started to kind of split up and everybody kind of took jobs, because it's a very, ungrateful work to be an entrepreneur. You work, you take a lot of risk, but you don't get paid for all those risks. You basically are working off of your savings and you are betting almost everything on it. And it's a really tough life because it consumes you. No vacation, nothing. I don't know if you've tried yourself to be one.
Noemie, this is super interesting. And maybe amongst our audiences, we have people who would love to start with something, would love to bring an idea they have into the light of day, but sometimes maybe are a little bit too cautious, too timid, maybe not to do it. Because there's, you know that a lot better than myself, there's a different mindset, a different attitude in different parts of the world. In the United States, it's completely fine to fail with something and then just do it again and then fail better. And at some point you'll have success. In Europe, it's a different world. Failure is not an option. And so how does that work in the startup world? So if I go bankrupt with my startup, my feeble Austrian mindset, European mindset would say, oh my God, bankruptcy, you go to jail, you're never going to get a loan for the rest of your life again, you're stigmatized. Mm-hmm. So how does that work in that world?
Marcus, you're so right. Like throughout the years, I've definitely noticed this cultural difference. And also because I grew up in France and live in the US and now in Israel, I've seen how the different cultures impact innovation. And I can tell you by far that the reason that Israel is so innovative as a country, as a nation, is because we don't have a failure stigma there. On the contrary, failure is seen as something somewhat positive because it means that you took a shot. It means that if you're smart, and most people, obviously are, you learn from that failure. And if I was an investor, which I'm actively trying to raise my funds, so I will be one soon, I would, if I had a choice between let's say that all the factors are equal. It's the same industry, same ideas and everything, but the founders is different. One tried something and failed, and one never tried anything, so has a clean record. I would invest in the one that tried and failed because I know for sure that this one has already more mileage under his belt and he learned something that the other guy who's trying to do the same idea does not. And I would rather that my money goes towards the guy who already had this sort of life experience. So we do encourage moonshots ideas. And so Israel definitely doesn't have a failure stigma. I would say Europe, it's felt extremely strongly, especially in France, because I can only speak about the countries that I know, where people are sort of ridiculized if they failed, or, and also by people who themselves never tried, which is even more hypocrite in a way. But I definitely think this is a great barriers of innovations. This is one. And in the US, I would say it's somewhat neutral and it's okay there. It's also not stigmatized, and it depends on who you ask. But in Asia, which I've traveled quite extensively, over there, oh my gosh, if you do fail, it's like losing face, losing honor, borderline, you have to kill yourself because you tried and you failed. And so all those things, I would argue, is what stands in the way of innovation.
But how would a thriving startup culture ever emerge in Asian countries then? It's an extremely risky process, and I mean, that's a cultural state of mind. So I could imagine you cannot get rid of a cultural self-understanding so easily.
It is extremely difficult. I would say it starts with changing mindsets, changing education, maybe, but it's so much deep ingrained in the culture that it might be hard to change. So, to your question, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I know there's a lot of delegations from China to Japan to Singapore through South Korea who come to Israel to study the Israeli innovation model. And we give them everything, from A to Z, and they can come back and try to replicate the model, but it still won't work because it's like if I try to take as an analogy the recipe of a baker, like you can bring the French baker into a different country, let's say in the US, and say, hey, I want you to do the same French baguette that I love in Paris. But it's not going to taste the same because you don't have the water, you don't have the same flour. So you have the same guys and the same skills, but you don't have the same ingredients. And so it's the same thing. If you try to replicate the recipe, but you are missing one or two ingredients, essentially the output will be different.
I'm learning so much. Thank you so much for taking the time, Noemie.
It's fun. Thanks for the questions, really.
Yeah, not really. So you had your two startups. You learned a lot. At some point, you ended up in Starburst. Or was there something in between, or are we already there yet?
No, there was obviously some things in between. After the startups, I was also doing a lot of business development work for other startups because I know and heard and understood their needs and their pain. I was also working for a VC fund that was investing in disruptive technology, including blockchain, where I learned a lot. And then Starburst kind of started as an opportunity that I didn't see coming, but I wanted to build an air show in Israel because Israel doesn't have, I would say, a global international air show like you would have in Paris at the Bourget or, the Dubai air show, which is also huge. And I was like, Israel is such a great innovative nation. Why don't we have an air show? So I took it upon myself to try to build one, and I was looking for sponsors. And that's how I came across Starburst. So I emailed them out of the blue and I say, hey guys, this is what I'm building. And I have this great idea of bringing this guy who's building the rocket engine, like a real life Iron Man. Maybe you heard of him. His name is Richard Browning from Gravity.
Mm-hmm.
Have you?
Yeah, totally.
In some
Absolutely.
of his videos?
We should have him on the show.
If you were, oh wow, I would so want to hear this podcast. So I was a huge fan of what the guy built. Okay, he's sort of my hero, and I was, also reached out to him and I say, hey, you should come to Israel. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll come, but you need to pay for XYZ, like his sponsorship fees. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I would say thanks to him and thanks to my fan situation and wanting to build, that's how I came across Starburst. So Starburst, interestingly enough, they said, no, they don't sponsor event. It's not part of the business model, which I understand now why, but I didn't then. So that didn't happen. But a year later, after I did this, I will reach out. They remembered me and they contacted me saying, hey, we are opening an office. We have these new contracts. Do you want to interview? And for me, I obviously jumped on the opportunity and I said, yes, please. And obviously I was lucky enough to get selected. But this is for me a dream job. Like it has everything I truly enjoy and I'm passionate with, which is things that fly, space, innovations, startups. So I feel so lucky because all day I get to speak with really interesting people that are trying to change the world for the better and looking to disrupt the aerospace industry. And I get paid for that.
That's a nice side effect, yeah. Before we talk about Starburst, let's go back in history. Over the years, working with distressed startups, working as a startup yourself, is there something, especially among the distressed ones, those who fail, who are close to failing, is there a common thread that when something is going wrong, is there something future startups or current startups could learn from your experience? Is there a pattern?
So I have thoughts on the subject. I think it's not an easy one to answer. And I'll answer in two parts. One, what I learned, but I want to share and give credit to where credit is due because I think there's a guy, and I forgot his name and I apologize, who did a lot of research, scientific research to understand why startups fail. Because if you understand why they fail, you will understand better why others succeed. And so he has an entire TED Talk around it. And he studies things like team implosions and lack of funding and market change and regulation to timing. And he put all of those factors and he find out that the number one reason startups fail is due to bad timing. So the saying, timing is everything, is not just a saying. It is actually true. Timing is everything.
Like Chromecast, WeCast, that was a typical timing issue.
Exactly. Well, it was a lot of different mistakes we did as well because it was my first, but also timing was a huge part in it. You're absolutely right, Marcus. And so how do you solve timing? Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball, so this is a hard one. But the right entrepreneurs will have access to information and they will find a way to get access to information that not everybody has. So they have what's called an unfair advantage. They either have a window of visibility into something which is about to happen in the industry, or they're just really smart and they kind of see the trends and they understand that the industry is going this way where everybody else is still thinking it's going the other way. So they have this sort of unique intuition, or they can be visionaries like Elon Musk, or, this guy, nobody told him that, hey, space rocket should be reusable and Mars was going to be a big thing, but he knew it then. And so is Steve Jobs, is one of those visionaries, but you really have only a few people like that in the world. So the others, they have to work a little bit harder and they have to ask the right people. And some of the right people, if you're in the aerospace industry, is Starburst. And why? Without going necessarily into it too much, it's because we have market insights. We are working with some of the leading aerospace companies that are what are making the market today. And they are telling us what they want to buy, what is a priority for them, which technology gaps is the most critical for them. And in a sense, as a group, they are themselves the market makers and the market movers. And so if you have this intel, you know where to develop the technology, you know which ones are more or less, going to work and which ones are more or less relevant. So this is one way to get access to info, but timing is everything. The other things I've found, so putting this study aside, I guess it comes down to people. You can have the best idea in the world, but I guarantee you that there's other people around the world also working on this challenge. If the challenge is worthwhile enough, which it should be if you're going to spend the next 5-10 years of your life working on it. And the difference between those who make it or don't make it is basically the team. Execution is everything. I see a lot of people trying to protect ideas by asking for NDAs and trying to be stealth and not telling their ideas because they're afraid that the next guy is going to steal it. And I always smile because I'm like, oh my gosh, if only you knew, and that there's another 5 startup trying to do the same thing. And at the end, you gain so much more by exposing your idea, by talking to people, by getting advice, by having mentors. That is worth taking the chance and exposing the idea. You should do it in a smart way, obviously, and try to protect yourself with patent if you can. But at the end of the day, it comes down to people attitude, people work ethics, and people ability to handle changes also, and not stay, stubborn on one idea. But adaptability is key. If the founder, is not a person who's adaptable and resourceful to changes, the chances of the startup succeeding is very low. Because as a startup, by definition, you are a bit of like in a lab. You're an experiment. You have a set of assumptions, and your job as an entrepreneur is to validate and refute all the assumptions that you can in the shortest amount of time that you can. And therefore, if you do find out new information, you should be in a position to pivot your idea and to change course if that's what the market requires. And that goes back to my previous points, which is you need to have the right founders and the right team to be able to do that.
So what's the coolest startup that Starburst is funding currently?
We have so many. I don't want to pick one and make the other ones feel bad. It's like asking which one is your favorite kid. Marcus, this is not a good question. But
totally. It's not a good... Yeah, totally. So try to find a way around.
No, but I will tell you the one that we are able to speak with and those that we published on the website. So we are funding Privateer, which I know you've interviewed as well in the past. So I can tell you, we have many in our portfolio that are doing some amazing thing in space, like Interstellar, which I know you also know. In Israel specifically, we also invested in Raimondo, which is trying to disrupt the Earth observation market. Also in Outpost, that was created by this also really great entrepreneurs. So the list goes on, but again, this is not in order of preference. We like them all.
Yes, sure. So what is, do you have a focus towards something? Where is Starburst located in that field?
Starburst is positioning itself as the number one accelerator that is focused exclusively on aerospace and defense. So we do have a focus ever since we were founded back in 2012, so more than 10 years ago. But within the aerospace and defense focus, you have 21 verticals that we look at specifically, which are very wide because there are verticals like in space, we have satellite telecommunications, launchers, obviously Earth observation solutions and in-orbit infrastructures. And then you have regional mobility, which include things like supersonic flights and hydrogen-powered aviations or clean aviations. And then we have what we called urban air mobility arena, which is more like drones, counter-drone solutions, flying cars. And then we have enabling technologies buckets, which is a lot of industries in itself, but they have space applications, or they have an application in the aerospace value chain, and therefore we are interested in them. Things like cybersecurity, AI, new manufacturing technologies. The list goes on and on. So we have 21 of those that we actively scout for and look for. And interestingly enough, these are also the vertical that is interesting to our clients. So there's a reason why we are focusing on those, and we are always updating this list because we're trying to keep up with what the industry demands. And this is the basis for our investment thesis. This is the basis for our accelerator work. Everything is around and going back to what does the market want.
So there must be a pretty in-depth knowledge about the space industry in order to make informed decisions about investing or not investing. So I'm taking now total advantage of you being on the show to get that in-depth knowledge, because the space industry is so dominated by Elon, by like a little further behind by Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson. Maybe what's he doing right now? So I lost a little track. But anyways, a little bit NASA, but NASA maybe not in a very positive way, especially recently when it comes to SLS, whatnot. So everything is dominated by Elon. And here, if we talk about the space industry, Elon dominates the vehicle sector, the reusable vehicle. He still dominates the constellation sector, maybe the Crew Dragon vehicle also. But I guess that the space industry is a lot more than these things. So I'd be super curious to find out what else we could see anytime soon in the future. So what else is on the table?
I mean, I love your question, and I want to say that it's funny because you think, like you mentioned, that Elon is dominating something. I don't see it. So first of all, Elon Musk for me is very much counterpart of SpaceX. I think SpaceX is, I see it as a turning point for the space industry. But I only see positive things coming from what he did, because it's thanks to him that we've seen such a crazy uptake in the space industry, which is now booming. It is now, there's a lot of interest. There's people like you doing podcasts, but you have a lot of people now looking to actively invest in space, because it's now a stabilized investment class, which was not a few years ago. And so things have been changing, and we have to ask ourselves, why? Where did it all started, and what was a turning point? And I want to say SpaceX for sure was a turning point. It started back 10 years ago when Starburst was also, in his diapers, like just starting up as a company. But at the time, SpaceX launched their first cargo commercial spacecraft, and he was the first, like when I say he, I'm talking about Elon, that proved that a private company, which is non-governmental, which is not a legacy players, were able to get a huge contracts from NASA. So he kind of already was a pioneer because he proved that this is doable. Then he continued from that point on, and he, came up with more innovations like the reusability of the rockets. He did it with the SpaceX Falcon 9's rocket. And that contributed to dramatically reduce the launch cost. He actually reduced the launch cost by close to 10x, which is a huge change. And he made space accessible once again for the US government. But not just that, he also proved to an entire generations of engineers, of dreamers, of people like you, me, that is taking an interest to space, that the technology can be tested on orbit for a fraction of what it cost just a few years ago. So he basically paved the way for a lot of young startups to also themselves become competitive in the industry. And I kind of want to use the analogy of the internet back in the 90s, and people didn't know, what we were going to do with the internet back then. And now, we cannot work if the internet is down. This is now going to be the case with the space industry.
Interesting. So what is in your basket at Starburst when it comes to new technologies? What is it that we can soon see at some point? Maybe not from specific startups, but maybe in the industry.
So all of these, changes in the industry created and spurred what I'm sure you heard before, what's called the new space revolution. And you've seen a lot of upstream and downstream segments that are kind of developing. And I want to say what we can see depends on which geographic locations you're asking. Because in Israel, for instance, we don't have really a lot of companies doing launchers that are competing, although we do have one. But we have a lot of what's called downstream, which is, a lot of different things like that is closer to what I described earlier, like the enabling technologies. You have solutions to, for instance, use AI for detecting detecting anomalies in telemetry, in satellite telemetry, to extend the life of the satellites. So a lot of things that don't really require a lot of hardware. You have a lot of them in Israel, and we are looking very closely at what's happening. But if you are zooming out on a global perspective, what you see is that every year you have a new space, a new hot topic in trend in the new space industry. So maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the hot topic was rocket launchers. After the rocket launchers, you had the Earth observations technologies was like a big thing. Then you had space communications. Then you had space tugs and all the topics of refueling assets in space. And now in 2022 and maybe going into 2023, the new hot topic that we see is manufacturing in space. So we've seen a lot of companies looking to solve this challenge, a lot of demand. And it's also kind of a reason why we launched in LA a new program called Care in Space, which is a program which is looking to solve it's like the intersection of health or health tech and space together. And we did a partnership with NASA and with Axiom. And interestingly enough, Axiom is sort of positioning themselves as a lab in space for you to test things. And anything from manufacturing things in space to doing experiment in space. But everything you do in space is somehow connected to our life here on Earth. And there's a reason why we want to build and test things and do it there. One, because if we want to, be a multi-planetary species, you need to be able to make things in space because you don't always have the time and the money to come back to Earth to make something.
No, it's not efficient.
Yeah, it's not efficient, and it's also not efficient is the word, and sometimes not possible. But sometimes also, which people don't know yet, you have a lot of experiments you can do in microgravity condition, which unlocks a lot of new possibilities in the innovation world. So that's why you have a lot of people trying to do blood testings and tests in space. It's not because we can't do it on Earth. We can. It's easier and it's cheaper. But when you do it in space, you can advance and do things which you cannot do on Earth. It has implications for drug developments, for 3D printings organs, for instance, for making lenses, which is one of the solutions that we tested not too long ago on the Rakia mission, which was led by an Israeli astronauts, the second one in history. So, I can go on and on. But if you're looking to something exciting for the years to come, it's manufacturing in space.
That's super interesting because it's an important argument against people saying that the space industry, the new space industry, is a waste of money because we have more challenges or more important challenges on Earth. It's a viable argument, but it doesn't work because the new space industry is not just about space tourism. It's about making life on Earth different. I wouldn't say better because we do not know yet, but it will help improve or change lives on Earth. Also by medical devices, by manufacturing things, because I think that manufacturing engineering bits for whatever construction site on Earth can have benefits. So I think it's too short-sighted to just say we're wasting money up there. Can't we solve our problems on Earth first and then venture into space?
I could not agree more, Marcus. I think you're so on point. And the truth is the money follows also what you're saying, because most investors, they're smart. They want a return on investment, and they want it within 5 to 10 years max. They don't want to wait 20 years or 30 years. So whatever is being invested on right now, and where the VC money is being poured, is what we called Earth impacting tech that is connected to new space, obviously, but that has real implication here on Earth first, because that's where the monetization strategy will first come into play. Because you do need to have clients, you need to have a business model which is scalable, and so all those innovations that we're launching into space is not just because we're thinking about Mars, but it's because we know that it's going to make our life on Earth better for it.
I think what people maybe are not understanding right, a few people I'm saying, is that when Elon says that he wants to go to Mars, to colonize Mars with his nuclear devices and stuff like that, he's just setting up a narrative, an omega point to dream towards. Maybe we're never going to be doing this, or not in the next decades, but it doesn't really matter because it's just something we can hold on to. I think this is something we're lacking in many other fields, a strong vision. And it's not necessary if that vision holds its promise.
It's an interesting thought. When I hear him, I also hear other things, and I guess I took it and interpreted it in a different way. I heard, I think his why, if you ask yourself, because everybody in the world has a why. Everybody has a reason why we're doing something. And I think Elon Musk's why is because he believes it's an essential part of the survival of the human species as we know it. Yeah. So by doing this, he's creating a sense of urgency. By saying, look, we can be hit by a meteorite at any point in time, and because all of our eggs is in the Earth baskets, we could end the life as we know it. And so he knows that we need to start working on being a spacefaring civilization now, because while the meteorite is already on his way, it will be too late, because it takes time to build these innovations. And so I think this is his way to create a sense of urgency by gathering or mobilizing people around a common cause, which is our survival, for the future generation. And it speaks to me. I can agree with it. I don't necessarily have this, although I'm very curious and I have this adventurous side. I want to go explore Mars, but it doesn't have to be Mars. It could be another planet, as long as we can ensure the survival of our species.
So we're already venturing into very philosophical realms here. I like that very much. Because we need strong narratives in many sectors, because this is how our minds work, in my opinion. If you're just going to work just for the money, you're not going to be happy. If you're going to work for a grander vision, you're going to be happy.
Yeah, it's all about meaning and purpose, Marcus. You're right.
Yeah. So Starburst is a global accelerator. So that's also what makes it unique. Why global? Why play it so big in the first place?
Well, it didn't start it as the big group. Our origins are very humble. It started with one office in one location 10 years ago, with Paris, with one office. And
so it's a French accelerator.
The founder and CEO, his name is François Chopard. He's French, and he's now live all over the world, but mostly US and France. But he started in Paris, and then we expanded with our next branch, which was Los Angeles, so to conquer the US. And then we quickly grew more. So we now have 8 countries or 8 offices, which is Paris, Los Angeles, Munich, Spain, Tel Aviv, of course, which I'm leading, Singapore and Seoul. And we are expanding and looking to expand into more countries. But I would say the basis for the expansion is always tied to the need. We want to be in a position where there is already an innovation ecosystem, where you have a lot of aerospace and defense activities, because that's what Starburst do. We are basically ecosystem makers. When we open a new office, our job is to connect the dots with the different players in the industry. And you have 3 or 4 main type of players in this world, really. You have the startups, which are very critical to the technologies and the innovations. You have the corporates, which mostly bring the money and the resources that you need. And then you have government institutions that also have a role to play. And then you have the investors, which deploys the capital. So when you put together all these 4 main players, you create a very successful ecosystem, and you create win-win opportunities for everybody, because everyone needs each other to succeed in their...
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I find super interesting? It's the simplicity behind that idea, because you're not inventing something new. You're connecting the dots, and that's the simplicity and the brilliance about it. And that's, of course, that holds true for any accelerator. But it's your job to take 2 hands and match them.
That's right. It's about connecting dots. We describe ourselves as super connectors. Our job is to open doors, is to reduce time to market on both sides, and to help people get to where they need faster by avoiding mistakes, costly mistakes that we've seen because of our unique position. So we are much more than an accelerator. Marcus, we are a VC-backed accelerator now, because we have our own VC fund, so we can also deploy money. But we also have a consulting practice, so we also give strategic advice to our clients on how to avoid those mistakes and on which directions the market is going. So we are basically this powerhouse of innovation, or an innovation catalyst, if you will.
So what's the share you're taking from your clients, from the startups? So if they're super successful, are you taking 90% from them?
Absolutely not. We are so startup friendly. We pride ourselves by having, by being true partners to our startup and our portfolio companies. And I feel confident that you can ask any of our startups portfolio what they think about Starburst, and you will hear positive things and feedback. So our model is very easy and transparent. What we do is we do not take money from startup ever, because we want them to spend the money to develop the R&D and to grow and get to where they need to be. However, we are also, not working for free. I don't believe you can have anything for free in this world. So what we do is we ask for sweat equity. So we put ourselves as advisors. So we advise them. We have different programs that are tailored to different maturity stage, depending on if they are early stage, so pre-seed, or late stage, between seed and Series A. And that is really our sweet spot, right? You need to be before A. If you are already bigger, you have less value for a need, and you don't need us as much. So we don't really work with startups that are A and above. And also, this is the riskiest time for them, when they are early stage and when they are between seed and Series A. And what we do is we offer them a package of service that has a certain value, and we exchange that value for percentage of equity. And the equity is anywhere between 1% and 3%. So it's very reasonable in all standards.
How do you get startups on board? So where do you find them, or will they also call you? And that would bring me to my next question. What would I need to bring to the table to meet your expectations?
So we have a team of scouts that basically scouts the world to look for the most innovative technologies and to talk to founders and filter and screen technologies that are interesting for our clients, which are the corporates looking for those tech. And so we have about 10 plus people doing this as a full-time basis. We look at portfolio companies from other VCs. We look at accelerators. We look at everything that is publicly available. But also we have a lot of people reaching out, because after 10 years, we've made a name for ourselves and we've established ourselves as a leading accelerator. So some people come to us. So we have, I guess our outreach is both inbound and outbound. We do both. And in order for you, if you are a startup and you're listening to this podcast and you want to reach out, so first it depends where you are in the world. If you are in the US, you should reach out to the US team. If you are in Israel, you should reach out to me, etc. So we have an office depending on where you are. And then if you are pre-seed, you would apply to the pre-seed accelerators. And if you are after you raise seed, which is really the best time for the late stage accelerator, you would have to go through a pretty, I want to say, thorough vetting process, which includes that you would be invited to pitch in one of our events. And it's our way to do our due diligence on you. So you come, you pitch and you present. We invite our ecosystem, our clients to listen to your pitch, and they vote. They say, yes, this is interesting for my company. I need this solution. And that gives us some visibility into how good of a fit you are for Accelerator. If you arrive in the top 3, because we have a pitch for about 7 companies and we only invite the first 3, then you get invited to join our Accelerator. And at that time only, you get to sign the equity agreement and you join the program. And after you join, you get a lot of support from us. You get fundraising support for your next round. You get business introductions, which is what they want the most, right? They want to be connected to the Airbus and the Boeing of the world and the Thales, because they want to show their solution to those potential customers, and they want to have a pilots with those people. And we help you basically promote and amplify your message so it stands out from the crowd. You know, as a podcast, you know, more importantly than more, that coverage is important because it helps deliver your message to the right people.
Exactly. So how long does that period take? So how long are you working together with startups?
So if it's early stage programs, it's between 4 to 7 months. And if it's late stage, so after they raise it, it's 12 months.
Nice. And it was quite a ride so far. Thanks so much for being super energetic still. 2 questions I'd like to ask, 2 unusual questions maybe. So we are building up a Spotify playlist for future space travelers, because traveling into space can be tiresome, I guess, because it's a long way to go wherever you want to go. So you need to make sure you got your cool, perfect playlist with you. And so what kind of tune would you introduce to that playlist? And I'm putting it up as we speak. So you need to pick one tune you wouldn't want to miss on that playlist.
Wow. Yeah, it's probably already in there. But, you know, the song that comes to mind is the one from the Marvel movie where he puts it on the radio. Like, I forgot the name. I can look it up on my Spotify.
Yeah, totally.
Let me see. Which one is the one I really like? I think it's called Blue Sky. Yeah, Mr. Blue Sky from Electric Light Orchestra. Do you have that one?
Nope, it's not in it. So I'm putting it right now into the playlist. The playlist is called Space Café Podcast Guest Tunes.
All right, have a look.
Yeah, you should. I started doing it like
Such
9 episodes ago.
Idea. I love it.
So we got everything in it. We have like carbon-based life forms. We have Billie Eilish. We have David Bowie. We have Paul McCartney. We've even Black Sabbath in there. Joy Division. Yeah, so it's a growing playlist. Thanks for your introduction. And now question number 2. Space Café Podcast is a coffee place. Now, why don't you share an espresso for the mind with us right now? You can pick whatever kind of topic you want to pick. Just something you feel like that could be an inspiration for our audiences. An espresso for the mind. What is it that you would like to share?
Wow. It can be anything. Like it could be
anything.
An inspirational quote. It could be...
If you want to talk about your daily workouts or quotes or whatever kind of habits, whenever you feel like that's worth sharing because it could be inspiring.
Okay. So, wow. Let me think for a second.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. So I want to share quotes because I think quotes, they are like a window into somebody's mindset. And it's interesting because it is also inspiring. And I have quite a few that I used to guide me in life. And so we're just going to share the few, and then you can choose the one you like the most.
Sure.
The first one I like to share is this one. It's called "The Risk of Failure is the Price of Success." And that is also a guiding line for me. I know that anything that you're afraid of is probably for the right reason. Like, you need to go after the fear, and overcome the fear. The second one, which I love, is the one by, it was attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, but after research, it wasn't really his. It's called, "For you have tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your eyes turned skywards, for there you have been, and there you will long to return." And I love this one because it's so true as a pilot. And then I think the last one is the Franklin D. Roosevelt one, which is "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And we're gonna stop here. There's more.
Nice.
Like,
Nice. So there's a lot of fear overcoming
yes.
notions in there, because fear is a permanent companion in your life, I guess, as a startup founder, as an accelerator director. So fear is a companion.
It's a companion, but it's also your best compass. Like, you shouldn't let it incapacitate you. You should let it fuel you. I think everybody has fear, like you said, in your life, but it's just a question of what you do with it. And some of the most interesting people I met in my life are the people who embrace it, and they do things in spite of fear, in spite of the uncertainty, in spite of everything, really.
Absolutely. I'm just looking at something I got today from my last visit in India. And I went to an ashram, Hindu ashram, and they had ashrams and Hindu places are very modern sometimes. So they offer even WhatsApp newsletters. So I got one of these newsletters right here. Most of it is in Hindi, so in Sanskrit, so I can't read it. But there's an interesting one I got today. It's today's thought. And the thought is, every successful person has a painful story. Every painful story has a successful ending. I like that one also.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's like, through their pain. Oh, wow. I love the website. I love it.
So this is a photo they took. I think it's handwriting.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I like, there's always pain behind success.
Marcus, can I ask you questions just to reverse
Sure.
the dynamic? Do you practice meditations? What are your thoughts around meditation and mindfulness? Because you mentioned ashram.
Thank
That's
you.
the only reason I ask.
Yeah, absolutely. When I went to India, I wanted to be in India next to my profession as a filmmaker, to be an apprentice for a new culture. So wherever I go, I want to learn everything. And so I went to this ashram to just find out what this is all about. And I'm really blown away by this completely different mindset of a culture that is way older than my own culture. So I have, to be honest, nothing to tell them when it comes to spirituality or when it comes to health. You have all the Ayurvedic principles and whatnot. So there's a lot I could learn. So when it comes to mindfulness, I think there's a lot of mindfulness going on for me personally when I'm doing workouts. So I do ultra running. I do very long runs, like longer than marathons. That's what ultra runs is all about. And this is a meditative state for me, I should say. And now people who are serious about meditation will laugh at me, but I dabbled a little with the Muse headband because I really liked it. Have you come across that?
I heard of it. Is it the one who's trying to match the brain waves to get you into the
totally.
beta or alpha state of mind?
Yeah. It totally works. And it gives me achievement benefits and points for my meditation adventures, which is kind of, I'm saying this now half smilingly, because if someone's like serious about meditation, they will tell me, get rid of that bullshit and sit down and do it. But I'm that kind of person. I need that playful approach, and maybe it did it for me. So I really liked it. But I sort of, I don't know, maybe I got a little too lazy now and then to just sit down. It's like with your yoga practice and whatnot. It's all about taking the time. And I know there's no excuse to invest 15 minutes of one's day into something like this. But I'm just also maybe a human being, I guess, with all its glitches. But yeah, so what I'm doing on a very frequent basis is the running, and that's my meditation. This is also something when I'm most productive when it comes to being creative and coming up with new ideas and being mindful, maybe also. I know that it was a lengthy answer now.
No, I loved it. Look, I think that whatever you're doing that is working for you is exactly the right thing for you. I don't believe there is a way. And, when I was in Bhutan, I talked to a lot of people that are practicing Buddhism, and I asked them, and they told me meditation comes from within. There's no rules. There's no, you should do 1 hour every day. You should sit every day. First of all, meditation, you could do it walking, you could do it washing dishes, and you could do it running, which is what you do. Yeah. So the how doesn't matter. Basically, the whole point of it is to have enough clarity of your thoughts so you are acting and no longer reacting. And whatever you're doing that gets you to that mindset and that gets you to the zone is exactly what you should be doing. And if you find a way which is fun for you by running, then continue. And it's amazing. And I love it that you sort of found your niche.
I'm a lifelong learner, eternally looking for the something. I'm totally aware of the fact that I may never encounter it, but I know that I need to pursue that something I will maybe never encounter. But it keeps me busy, makes me happy. Yeah. How about you?
So I dabble also into it. So for the longest time, just like you, I couldn't sit. Like I was like, wow, this is so hard. How do people do it? And I'm like, why can't I just meditate? Until the day I went and I did Vipassana. I don't know if you heard of it. No, it's not yoga. It's
not yoga?
No, it's called Vipassana, which means to see the reality as is, but it's a form. It has different ashrams all over the world. It was created many years ago by Goenka, this guru, but it's completely free by donation only. And you sit for 10 days where you do a vow of silence. So you don't speak for 9 days, which is really interesting because when you don't speak with no one, no eye contact, nothing, you are forced to be confronted with your thoughts. Yeah. You are alone with yourself. And a lot of things come up, and it's a very interesting process. And then you sit, and they teach you how to meditate, and they do it mostly by observing feelings on the body. So, from the sensations on your skin to maybe you're hitching to maybe you want to, your nose is burning or whatever. And you just sit through and learn how to observe those feelings by going deep inside. So this was for me sort of what unlocked the meditation world for me. So I don't practice every day. I don't sit, but now I have the skills, meaning if tomorrow I feel overwhelmed, I had a long day, something happened, and I need to reset, I know how to push the reset button. And I know I can always sit down somewhere in an office and just do the exercise I've learned and then come out of it fresh. And for me, this is worth everything because you found your reset button. And I don't know that many people know how to do that.
Thanks for sharing that. That's super interesting. So Vipassana, that is called.
Yeah, you can Google it, and they have a center everywhere in every country, almost.
I'll look that one up. But again, I was so blown away by the spirituality I encountered in India, and they're not clinging to some ancient things. This is very present, and this is this is very modern, I should even say. And
Yes.
in that ashram, so I visited that ashram that is like almost a university campus size, huge place. So anyone can go to. So I could go there and spend my 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. But the interesting thing was at 5 p.m. it was, I can remember. So I was walking through this place, and then a person came along and said, "Hey, you please sit down." And they told everyone to sit down. Like there were like hundreds or maybe thousands of visitors. So we had to all sit down. And then through the loudspeakers, we heard a guided meditation that would usually happen every day at 5 p.m. And that was really beautiful. So I sat there for 15 minutes, like on the street in that campus. My eyes closed. And then once that was over, everybody went after their businesses and disappeared wherever they wanted to disappear. So that was kind of really interesting.
I love it. That must have been a magical moment because it was almost like a forced reset. Like they're like, you just take 50 minutes and you breathe and nothing but just listen to the mantra.
You got your shopping bags left and right, and then someone says, "Hey, sit down, meditate now."
Yeah. Sounds like a trip of a lifetime. I really love India, and I feel very close to the Buddhist culture much more because it speaks about values, about, doing good, and they believe in a concept of karma, like doing good brings you good, etc. And to me, it makes a lot more sense than...
And you don't have to look anywhere. There's no God, there's no right one, there's no only God or whatever.
Yeah. It's
just in yourself.
Everywhere.
It's in yourself, my friend. Right,
That's right.
Exactly. It's everywhere. Anyways, Noemie, we blasted off from our space world into another astral. Thanks for that question. Really, thank you so much.
Like I said, so much fun exchanging with you. Have you ever been to Israel before?
No, never. It's on my bucket list.
I'm glad to hear it. Definitely, if you come, when you come, not if, when. Please do reach out. I'd love to, give you a tour of the facilities, take you out for a drink and show you the Tel Aviv lifestyle. And I'm sure you'll be blown away by what you see, not only on the innovation industry, but also in the space industry, which is booming and developing so rapidly. So maybe I can introduce you to more people so you have more Space Café content as well.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to work my way through your startups in your portfolio anyway. So I think we need to stay in touch.
That will keep you busy. And you can also talk to the founder and CEO, François Chopard. He does a lot of PR and podcasts, and he always has interesting things to say because he sees everything from this global position because he speaks to all the countries. I only share what I know from my Israeli perspective and French and US, but he sees it from global. So he's also very interesting to talk with.
Super. All right, Noemie, thank you so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for flexibility, and sorry again for all the changes, Marcus, and thank you for working on a Saturday. I don't know if this is usual for you, but I appreciate it. And I can't wait to to hear and share the podcast when it's ready to be published. So let me know, and I'll share it with my network as well.
The unexpected finale of this episode wasn't agreed upon, and I went back and forth on whether to leave it in or edit it out. After all, who cares what I have to say about mindfulness? But on the other hand, I think we live in a time when we should leave the beaten paths when the opportunity presents itself, and so that's what I did. Sorry if I forced you to leave earlier, and if not, I hope to see you again next time. I look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye.